So, what do you want to start with, just quickly?
This is living your authentic life.
Should I just start with, like, being on that walk and having the thought?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. The most authentic place. And then we'll let the conversation flow the way that it was flowing.
Yeah, earlier.
Dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try and roughly follow that progression though, because I think that was good.
We always do our best work off script. Just so everybody at home knows this. I know that this probably won't make the cut, but like the fact that every single conversation that's just naturally flowing and we don't have a camera in front of us is gold.
I know. We missed out on so much good stuff.
It's just the worst. In the best way.
Okay. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
This is Living Your Authentic Life. I'm Emma.
And I'm Aiden.
And welcome to today's episode. We are going to talk about reconnecting with crying today. And the reason that this came about was because I took myself for a walk on Sunday. It's a new rule I've given myself that once a week I have to have a walk by myself without my dogs to give myself some head clearing time. And I did it for the first time this week and was very grateful that I did, because I had a really great thought while I was on the walk. I'd happened upon one of those little street libraries and had a look in there, and there was this book about the author had spent a year of his life being vulnerable and trying to rediscover love. And from being a child had really cut that part of himself off and was learning how to reconnect with that part of himself. It really made me think about when I was younger, and I did that exact same thing. I was always a very sensitive kid, and I think something that's really interesting is that we're always told not to cry. When we're kids, it's, stop crying, you're being silly, calm down, settle down. When we're a little bit older, maybe that pre-teenage, we're teased for it. I know my brother's teased me a lot. And then as we get a little bit older and we get into relationships, depending on the type of relationships you had, then you may have had a partner that told you not to cry. I had this thought, and I realized that I had been reconnecting with that part of myself for probably the last, I'm going to say intentionally the last 2 years, but unintentionally probably for about 5 years. Probably since I got into a relationship with my partner. Yeah. And felt safer, that it was safer to express myself in ways that I needed to. And crying is very cathartic. Yeah. I love a good cry, especially if I'm getting overwhelmed. I remember when my brother was visiting and there was a lot happened in this short period of time. A lot of stressful things happened. And we went out for breakfast and he was leaving that day. And I just burst out crying. And he was like, "Don't cry. Strong women don't cry." And I was like, "Yes, they do."
Oh, no. Worse. And you know that's like coming from a good place, right? Of like a brother who's like concerned. Yeah. And they don't want to see you like distressed. And they say, oh, don't cry. It's okay. Like it'll all be okay. And try and like unintentionally stifle that part of you that's
just trying to
get it all out, right? Like it's so cathartic to just cry and not have to feel everything inside.
Exactly. And one thing that I was really proud of myself for, because I think this was the first time I've ever said this, was explaining to him, like, I just need to cry. I'm okay. I've just got this build-up of emotion and I just need to cry and I'll feel better once I've cried. And I think I spent about 5 minutes crying, you know, in the middle of this cafe at the table. He was just eating his sandwich and being like, okay. But I felt so much better afterwards.
Yeah. Interestingly, so Brene Brown, who I've mentioned before, she had for a while a podcast called Unlocking Us, which is very similar about kind of connecting with yourself, and as a vulnerability and shame researcher, really kind of diving into these things. And she had on the podcast, this is a podcast episode that Nick and I have listened to together like 5 times. So many times, just this one episode of her podcast where she interviews this set of twins who talk about a book that they wrote about burnout and how the reason that people burn out is because they're not closing off the stress cycle and they're doing so much throughout their day that is stressing them out, and then there's not like a close or an end to that meets kind of the same limit of the stress that there is. And one of the key things that they say helps is crying, but crying intentionally. So crying so that you can kind of like actually get that release. And something that I've realized recently is that I don't know that I've really cried in the last couple of years intentionally. It's gotten better recently, but when I stopped drinking, I realized that I hadn't cried. And after I stopped drinking, I didn't cry for probably 6 months at all.
Wow.
Because I didn't know how to do it without alcohol and how to feel those emotions without some sort of, I guess, pathway.
So you would only cry when you drank?
Yeah. So for a long time before that, I don't think that I could accurately say kind of the distance pre-sobriety, kind of when the last time that I'd been able to just cry without alcohol was.
Wow.
I would say years.
Years. Wow. Yeah, okay.
And it's really interesting to be now almost 18 months sober and to realize, to have kind of come from that and to realize that I had emotionally disconnected and that I hadn't been really kind of feeling any emotions in an authentic way, that it had all just been through alcohol or through some sort of other thing that was gonna like hit me really hard and fast and get it all out so that I didn't actually have to deal with it.
Yeah, because you're not coherent, right, when you're drunk and emotional.
Yeah, that's definitely not closing the stress cycle, like Brene Brown said. Like that's crying in a way that's not actually releasing anything because you're not processing stress when you're drunk.
Yeah, you're not listening. Probably a lot of people the next day, even if you were like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed I cried, and your friends would probably be like, oh, it's okay, you were drunk. You were just drunk. And then let's all just swiftly move past it.
Yeah. And also like the post-drinking anxiety, like hangxiety. I don't know if that's something that you've ever experienced, but
yeah, I used to have massive emotional hangovers.
Yeah, I'd feel crippling anxiety afterwards, but couldn't actually like process it because I didn't know. Like I'd cried the night before and I was out of tears and just like not really able to kind of do anything. Yeah,
it's so interesting because I don't know, I just feel like we've never been told that it's, I mean, I don't know. It's not that we've not been told it's okay to cry. You know, like my mum was very maternal and loving. You know, the amount of times that I cried while she hugged me, you know, she was probably the one person that I felt really safe crying around when I was younger. But I think somewhere along the road, I very much got the feeling that it was a feminine thing to do. It was a weak thing to do.
Yeah.
And I remember intentionally trying to stop myself from crying many times when I would want to cry. And I think on top of that, tried to take on more male traits, more male personality traits, while still being sexy and, but also, trying to be more laid back.
It's like, they call it the pick-me girl now. Where it's this really, the pick-me girl. So it's the girl who is always, like, disconnecting from her emotions and being very, like, aloof emotionally and kind of blasé about everything.
Oh, that was totally...
But then, like sex goddess, sort of, like...
Yes.
Vibe. Like, trying to put off this very, like... I'm better than other girls because I don't have those.
Yeah, I don't have all that emotional baggage. Yeah. I'm not high maintenance. Like, I can be chill. I can joke around. I can have casual sex. All of that stuff.
That's a pick-me girl.
That was I didn't know there was a name for it.
That's a thing that I've only recently learned. I think this is kind of a Gen Z thing.
Yeah, probably.
The Gen Z term.
Because
they're great at categorizing all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's literally what... If you look back at all the movies and TV series that were around when we were younger, that was what was getting displayed to us, is that guys found it annoying when girls were emotional, when they would cry, when they would be high maintenance by expressing their feelings and emotions. And because I had some warped idea in my head that all of my self-worth was wrapped up in being the most desirable girl or woman for a guy, like I put all of my self-value in that when I was younger, and it took me a really long time to rewire my brain. I didn't clock onto it until I was like probably 21, and I realized what I'd been doing for so many years. And
that's so interesting. I had like the exact opposite approach when I was younger, where I like desperately wanted to be unapproachable. Like, I did not want to be in any way soft. I wanted to be as hard-edged as possible and very, like, prickly in personality, and pushed, like, so many people away. And was like, I've mentioned her before, the little rage goblin. My little rage goblin was rampant and just didn't want any affection, or was afraid of affection, maybe, and didn't want to risk the pain, and so was very like, nope, none of it, not a single thing. We're going to be so edgy in the opposite way. And of course, like, as a person who cries when they're angry, like, that was, like, I think probably the beginning of this whole shoving all of your emotions down and not showing emotions. And, like, if you're going to be angry, you should at least be tough about it.
Yeah, that I can resonate with. Because I used to always cry when I would get angry.
Same. All the time. I still do it. I still cry when I'm angry. Or I like, feel myself choking up and I, like, push it down.
Yeah.
I try not to anymore. But with this whole journey, I've realized that it's really hard for me to actually cry in a way that's, like, cathartic anymore.
Yeah. Even by yourself? Like, even alone?
Yeah, it's harder when I'm alone.
Wow.
Like, I have such a supportive team at work. And I think that I've cried more chatting with them. Surface cries, not as deep and cathartic as I want.
Like a little teary.
Yeah, but like that's the closest to crying that I get anymore. Is just like that. Church, small groups, I'll cry at those. I used to be able to cry very easily during like a church service if it was passionate enough. Worship music always gets me. But like when I'm alone, I don't know. It's like part of me just shuts down.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've experienced that. I could always cry, but I just would try and hide it from other people. But I would still cry a lot alone. But it was more like despair kind of crying. Like I think at those periods of time, I was incredibly emotionally unbalanced.
Yeah.
I mean, no wonder, right? Like, I think I was very unbalanced between like my masculine and feminine energies. So trying to take on all of this masculine energy, and then when I would allow myself to be feminine and to cry, it would be like uncontrollable sobbing. And I think that's probably played a role in my depression as well, because I would just feel like there was this gaping hole in my chest, and I would sob and sob and sob, and like afterwards I would just feel so spent. I'd feel so exhausted.
I think that's probably part of the reason that I always like pushed it back and pushed it down, is that I had this sense that like, okay, if I start crying, I don't know that I'll stop. I don't know when I'll stop. I don't know how I'll stop. And I guess I did go through a period of being completely emotionally unstable when I was in uni, and I was trying to figure out like hormonal birth control and all of that, and the way that just kind of wrecks your body.
I think the pill has so much to answer for.
It absolutely wrecks your hormone cycle, and for that to be happening when so much is going on for a uni student.
Yeah, when
you're young,
teenager, you're like, and you've already got fluctuating hormone levels like nobody's business, and then you go and chuck some like artificial hormones in there.
It's just a hellscape for emotions. And so like when I would cry when I was in uni, God bless my husband for what he's put up with in our relationship, because I definitely was emotionally manipulative and toxic to him, because I would just go through these periods where I'd be fine one minute and then like furious the next, and then crying and seething rage, or like so depressed that I was inconsolable. Which also probably contributed more to this idea that like, okay, I need to stop crying.
Yeah, I need to put it away and not do that.
Yeah, I need to not let other people know that that's what I'm going through. That I'm...
Yeah.
If I'm going to talk about it, I need to talk about it calmly. And then it became a situation of like, okay, well, I don't know how to talk about it calmly, so I'm just not going to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like going to the other extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would definitely do that with people, although I would still cry on my own. Like I would get so choked up trying not to cry, to the point where like when you're, let's say you're having, I don't know, an argument with your boyfriend or something, and they'd be waiting for me to answer a question, and I'd be sat there like with my jaw clenched, because I'd be like, if I open my mouth, I'm gonna cry, and I don't want to cry, and so I just sit there in silence. And I'd try and choke out a couple of words. I just couldn't communicate.
Yeah.
Because I refused to. I mean, even now that's still something that I struggle with, but I've learned to, you know, if that happens with Dean, my partner now, I will actually say to him, like, I just need a minute. And like sometimes it's not a minute, sometimes it's like 6 or 7 minutes, and he's like, are you gonna answer me now? And I'm like, just wait, you know, because I'm trying to get my emotions under enough control so that I can actually open my mouth without...
And say something and not just break down. Yeah.
I
do that with Nick too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. It's hard, man. Also, like, I hate asking for help anyway, which is a huge, like, personality flaw, I think. It feels, and I, like, recognize that it's very hypocritical, that I want to help people and want to like support people, but as soon as somebody wants to support me, I like shut down, and I can't conceive of a way that they could possibly help me. Like, I know that there's so many ways that I could be helped and that I need help, and I just like, I go flat.
You'll get there.
I know.
You will, because I've been there too. I think in my head I was always like, no one knows my own mind better than me. Yeah. So, basically, if I disagree with what someone says, then I'm not going to take it on board. So there's just no point in me even listening.
Yeah.
Which was really, what's the word I'm looking for? Like self...
It's that idea of like self... feeding back into yourself and not kind of evolving.
Yeah,
right?
you know,
it's like the echo chamber.
like I think I mentioned it last episode, that like superiority inferiority complex, where, you know, it's like I thought I like knew better than everyone else, but also thought that I wasn't worth a lot. So it was kind of like I had so many insecurities. I didn't think a lot of myself, but at the same time I was like, no one's going to tell me something that I don't already know, and if it's something different, then
they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's really self-sabotaging.
It is.
But I used to have this mentality, and I think I still definitely do to some extent. I have the mentality of like, I can get myself out of this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to burden anybody else with this. This is a lot. Everybody else has stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm not going to add
Why
my
should
problems.
I trouble? Yeah.
And that's so rich, given that every single time that I'm trying to face my problems and somebody brings something to me, I'm immediately like, yes, I am 100% on board. I will help you through your problems because I don't actually want to deal with my problems right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the what do you call it? That's part of that cycle in your head where, I don't know, there's a break in the logic. Because same, like I would, if anyone came to me for help, I would help them, but would never ask for help myself, would very rarely feel like I wasn't going to be burdening someone. And
I never consider anybody who comes to help as a burden.
No, of course not.
Like, I always find it to be a gift and an opportunity to help somebody, especially my loved ones. And I never give them the opportunity to help me.
Yeah. I think it really takes practice. Because I still have trouble with it. I'm definitely way better. And a lot more comfortable, I think, with asking for help. And also when those little voices come up saying, no, they don't want to hear about your problems, I'm better at telling them to shut up. But probably with like small to medium problems, I still think with my really big problems that I internalize a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then even like going on my kind of spiritual journey, then getting a new tap of like, you know, that you can just meditate and all of this will be better. And, you know, sometimes that's not the case. Like sometimes you really do just need some support and a conversation with a friend or whatever it is. So it's almost like it re-upped, and I'm having to work through that on a different level now.
And it's really hard to work through. It's like, it's so hard.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I just think our brains and thoughts are so deeply conditioned to don't be high maintenance, don't have a lot of baggage, you know, and even though logically we know now that that's not right.
Yeah. And it's not a genuine portrayal of the human condition.
Yeah.
But also, like, that's like definitely what we've gotten as two femme people who grew up kind of in that society. But it's the same thing that a lot of masculine people faced as well. And kind of men growing up being told, don't cry.
Don't cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I've been with my partner for over 6 years, and I've only seen him cry twice. Which, you know, I think is sad, because I do know there are occasions where, you know, an event has happened in his life and I've asked him, did you cry? And he said yes. And I'm like, when? You know, because he was like, when I was by myself, which is great, but yeah, I mean, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've cried in front of my partner.
Yeah.
But I just don't think, you know, as much as we might have been treated as a nuisance for crying as girls and as women, it was still more, and I say this in air quotes, acceptable for us. Whereas guys, I don't think it was as much.
Well, but part of that as well is that we were considered again, with the air quotes, weaker sex. And so it was expected that we would be emotional and that we would cry, which of course put that expectation on us to be tougher and to toughen up so that we could make something of ourselves and not just be seen as a weak woman.
Yeah.
But like, to have the expectation that you shouldn't cry or it's not okay for you to cry at all. Like, I can only really just imagine what it would have been like to not have it be self-imposed. Or not have it only be self-imposed, but to have it be so external.
Yeah. Yeah. And expected that you should not cry, especially in public.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think, you know, this of course isn't a blanket rule for everyone, but I do think, you know, most guys in general around our age group probably aren't as openly emotional or as easily openly emotional with, you know, most people. It may be only very specific people in their lives. I just had a brain fart. I totally forgot where I was going with that. What were we talking about? Men crying.
Starting to emotionally disconnect a little bit.
Got it. So I do think a lot of women now are having to be the ones to see their partners start to unpack and process a lot of emotions that they have held down for long periods of time. And you're then having to, I don't want to say having to, because I think it's actually a gift to be able to be with someone while they're going through that process and be their safety. But I think that's probably a lot. Like if you're with someone who's, you know, 30, 35, 40 years old and is only just learning how to unpack and cry and process their emotions on a more kind of vulnerable and open level, that would also be a lot to...
I have a lot of opinions on that.
Okay, do share.
I don't think that it's a woman's responsibility, regardless of how much it feels like a gift, to be the person that has to go through all of that and walk with them through this emotional unpacking. That is the job of a trained therapist, not your partner. And that's as a person who will gladly support my husband emotionally.
Yeah.
But part of that's because I know that I'm not the only support that he has.
Yeah.
And I know that if things are hard, he will seek professional help, and it won't just be my responsibility to emotionally support him and to do all of the emotional labor.
Yeah, I get your point with that. I do. And you're right. I don't think it's anyone else's job to I guess withstand all of your emotional unpacking, particularly in more severe cases, right? Because like if you're not a trained professional, you might not even have processed your own stuff, so how are you going to help someone else do it? But yeah, still I don't think it's so much a woman's job, but like it's a part of your role as a partner to be there for your partner. And yes, you know, like ideally they will, if they need to, like if it's that severe, they will be seeking external help as well on top of. But I guess what I mean is that when someone first starts going through that and they need their partner there with them.
I also should probably just reiterate that like this is all coming from a place of having been the emotional dumper, the person who kind of dumps all of that stuff, and to realize and recognize that what I was doing was not fair to my partner and my now husband, to make it all his responsibility. And I recognize that there's some level of like emotional manipulation in that, if that is the case, if you're not seeking professional help. Because I wasn't at the time. I was a broke college student who couldn't afford, because I was living in the US and didn't have health care.
Yeah.
And so like...
Well, that's it. Like, it's circumstantial as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I'm certain that that's part of the reason that I'm so like, it's not anybody else's responsibility to carry your emotional burdens. And part of the reason that I'm kind of in the mindset that I am now about my own emotional burdens is that I'm so convicted of this idea that it's not anybody else's responsibility.
Yeah, but I would, like, personally, I wouldn't look at it as like carrying someone else's burdens, but walking along beside them. So it would also depend on your own ability to compartmentalize and your partner's ability to take responsibility and accountability for themselves and get, external help or be somewhat conscious of how heavy they are, not laying it on, but you know what I mean, like how much emotion are they pouring out, how regularly, you know, what's going on in your life. Like, I think it's not as black and white as one or the other. There's going to be grey areas for everyone, and each situation will be so different for sure. But I think feeling safe to share with your partner and be
Accepted and not judged.
Accepted, not judged. And like initially, just sharing with you, the person they trust the most in the world, might be all they can manage.
Yeah.
And then go and talk to a stranger.
That is something else that I think that as femme people, we are really lucky, is that it was totally normal for us to emotionally discuss things with our girlfriends and with other femme people, right? Like we would have that emotional support network to talk about it with friends that a lot of masked people don't have, and men and people raised as men wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that with their guy friends, because that wasn't seen as socially acceptable.
For sure. Like, my partner is in his almost mid-30s now, and I remember years ago asking him, who do you talk to when you have stuff going on? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I don't know, do you talk to your friends? And he goes, oh, but about what? And I was like, I don't know, if we've had an argument or if you've got something going on in your life, like, do you bring that stuff up? And he goes, no, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And, realizing that he'd reached, 30 and potentially never had anyone in his life that he could...
Yeah.
So, like, it's been years of learning how to communicate with each other, and
100%.
him learning, how to express himself and how to verbalize his emotions, as opposed to just giving like blunt blanket statements as responses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that recently happened within my church community that I think is so beautiful is that we started doing retreats in the last, I think it's been like a year and a half now since the first one, but we had like weekend retreats where a group of men would go and do a men's retreat, and then a group of us femme people, women, would go and do a women's retreat. And like ours was super like feel good, like share emotions and like be vulnerable with each other. And the men's was also that.
Yeah.
Which I found out like after we'd all already had the weekend, that the men had just as much actually like sat down and been like, look, it's problematic in society that men don't talk about where they're at emotionally. And so like every man who went on that had the opportunity to just do that and just connect with other men in their church community. And since then, our community and our church has like had a shift, and become so encouraging and supportive in a way that I thought that we already had reached, but it's more than I could have expected.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I would call the pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Is just going on those retreats and having that opportunity.
Yeah.
For the men more than the women, but also for us.
Yeah. But you know what I'm seeing a lot of that is with the breathwork workshops, particularly for guys. So there's this guy called Johannes, I can't remember his last name, but he's a pretty well-known breathwork practitioner. And I was on his Instagram page and I saw this video of basically like this group of guys, and I guess they'd been doing some breath work, and this one guy was just pouring emotion. Like he was, sobbing, and all of the guys like picked him up and like held him above their heads, and Johannes was, saying, make him feel like the love and support that he has, like to let this out. And it was one of those videos that just gave me like absolute full body chills. Like, it was so amazing to watch.
That's so good.
And I think because breathwork has become really popularized now, there's tons of like workshops and seminars, and I think particularly anyone who's involved in the fitness community, runners, people who take ice baths, people who do saunas, and are into nutrition and to weight training and whatever. Like breathwork has now become part of that whole thing, whole vibe. And so I've been seeing a lot more of these specifically for men, like breathwork seminars, and you're seeing these videos on Instagram of men having these whole body emotional releases, like women as well, but it's funnily enough it's the male only ones that I feel most moved by, because you don't see it.
Exactly. Because how rare of a thing, how rare and beautiful of a thing to see that. This is not the same, but it really reminds me. I don't know if you've seen Midsommar.
Yes.
The scene where she's crying about...
Oh, and they're all
crying together and like having like this whole emotional release moment with her. There's like... I could talk about the like theories and the critical analysis of that movie in very like deep. But the thing that I am convicted by in that movie is that like that was probably the whole movie is setting up this main character, the Florence Pugh's character, as being emotionally unattached because she doesn't want to show emotions and be like too much, right? And then she's actually getting emotional support in that community for the first time. It's the first time that you see her get emotional support. Which
I think is why, like, by the end of the movie, when she's chosen to, sacrifice her boyfriend.
And she's smiling while she does it, is because she's finally feeling emotional release.
And feels part of, a community, a village, that she will never go through anything alone again. I've definitely...
So do you definitely think that she stayed?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
Same.
Totally. But yeah, I've also, for that same scene where they're all going through it together, because I know I've read this about communities, long ago, that the village would all feel together, probably maybe not in that exact style where they're all holding her and
like, all crying her.
But like, if there was a death, the whole village felt that death. The whole village mourned for that death. The whole village was part of that sacred burial, and
the opposite as well, where they would all like rejoice with birth.
Yes.
And the idea of like it takes a village to raise a person. I think it comes from that.
Yeah, I really like that, and I had a thought today because I feel like a lot of this, uncovering who your most authentic self is actually very much connecting to your inner child, because your inner child is the more pure form of you that came into this world, and it's as you went through life that you started picking up all of this baggage left, right, and center. So when you connect with your inner child, I feel like you really connect with yourself, who you truly are. And the whole it takes a village to raise a child, like it almost takes a village to raise your inner child as well, right? Because I mean, you've got to do a lot of that work, but I think it would be incredibly difficult to do with no support system, with no love in your life. And I don't mean romantic love, but if you didn't have close relationships with friends, if you didn't have a good relationship with your parents or your siblings, if you're someone that just had no one, that would be an incredibly harsh environment to raise your inner child all on your own.
Without a doubt. The importance of in the LGBT plus community and in communities of people who have been like survivors of domestic abuse and child abuse and things like that, the idea is called like your found family, the family that you find throughout life, the people who you can connect with on a much deeper level than you can connect with maybe your...
Excuse me, sorry.
Okay.
I'm just choking on my tea.
I would offer you more tea, but I'm unfortunately not.
Good. Keep going.
The people that you find who you connect with most deeply, kind of just throughout your journey, rather than kind of familial people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I've really found a lot of comfort in, especially having moved away from my family, because I'm very close to my family.
Yeah, you are. You're so cute.
I love my family. I do not think that my family is perfect. If any of my family is listening, I love you guys. We are chaos incarnate sometimes. We all know it. I'm sure we all know it.
Yeah.
But I would walk through fire for my family. And to have moved to the other side of the world was a lot emotionally and was quite difficult. And having left as well my best friend over in the US and a lot of my sorority sisters who are like actual sisters to me, to have kind of left all of that on the other side of the world in another continent, and to come here and to feel love and support from friends here, from meeting you, from feeling really, really welcomed in Nick's family and Nick's friends, and having that support as well, and finding an incredible team that I'm working with in my current role. Like everything that I have here is like found family for me. Yeah. And it's a village that is kind of like self-curated, which is so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you get all of that freedom to choose who's going to be in your village. And I think that's why it's so important to really think about the people that are in your life and whether they are adding to it in a good way or whether they are like taking from it. Because I definitely, when I first came out here, and it's interesting because like back at home, like I had friends, and I think I was quite emotionally disconnected with myself at the time that I left, which was why it was so easy for me to come out here.
Yeah.
But I always struggled, I think, with friendships. Always felt like I didn't get enough from them. I don't know, I wasn't appreciated as a friend, and I had all of these hang-ups. And like I'd have birthday parties and stuff, and like people would cancel, and this really like became a theme for me, like even when I came out here. And I did have my first friends out here, like we met in a hostel and we all moved in together, and they weren't friends at all. They're actually, particularly one of them was like really not a nice person and would just put me down a lot. And when I moved away to, you know, more of like the suburbs, and I decided I was done like going out drinking and partying. And then I'd say, oh, you know, let's just meet up for lunch. And then they just wouldn't reply. It's basically like, if you're not going to come out and party, then we're not interested. Yeah. And so I went through a really long period with having no friends at all here. And I would just go to work, go to the gym, go home every day.
I have a question. Do you think that part of the reason that the people around you were so toxic is because you weren't being authentic to yourself at the time?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I can honestly say now, whether my perception was warped or whether that was what was actually happening at the time, it was down to me. But at the time I couldn't see. I was in total victim mode. Like, you know, why don't people love me enough? Like, you know, I give all of this kind of, you know, love out, and I don't feel like I would get it returned. But I was overly sensitive, and everything hurt me. And I don't think I was a very enjoyable person to be around. I think back to who I was then, and, you know, I'm not surprised if people didn't want to spend that much time with me, and if I didn't get invited to everything, because I wouldn't want to spend time with 16-year-old Emma. I mean, I'd love to like give her a hug and say, "Don't worry, kid, it's gonna be okay." But
it will
like,
get better.
Would I want her around at my party? No. Yeah, like, you know, I've had to come to all of these realizations that, oh fuck, like maybe I've got some stuff I need to work on. You know, and maybe I need to care a little bit less as well, and stop taking things so personally.
Yeah.
In a healthy way, not because first it was like, okay, well, I'll just shut down and not care about things.
Yeah.
But when I started doing that in healthy ways and not like holding grudges against people and, you know, feeling like they'd done me wrong, then and then I started to clear my life of people who, you know, weren't the type of people that were really adding any benefit to my life and that were maybe damaging me. Because, you know, sometimes people are sucky people, and you've got to go, okay, this isn't what I want in my life. But that paved way for some really amazing friendships. You know, I started college and I did my PT quals, and we just like, our class just became like this tight-knit family. I started taking salsa lessons, and then like made some really close friends in there, and, you know, then I changed to massage, and then I met you and some of our other friends, and then they all kind of left the country, and so I've had these like cycles of building these great relationships, and then they'd kind of fizzle out or they'd go, and I think just learning that that's okay. Yeah, it's okay for people to come into your life and have a beautiful impact and really enjoy their time, and then they go off and they start a new stage, or maybe you go off and you start a new stage, and that's okay. It's okay for it to just be what it was and just be grateful for that. It doesn't have to continue on.
I think I find it really, really beautiful, especially though when you find those relationships, and regardless of kind of like what either of you is going through, you're still able to find connection. Like, V and I have had long periods of our schedules getting in the way, and them being like traveling for work too much, and me being so stressed at work or stressed financially when I was not in a stable 9-to-5 job, and feeling like, oh, I don't really have time right now. I have to work extra so that I definitely can get by, and them being like, I'm just so tired that I genuinely don't have anything to give. And to be able to go through those periods and then reconnect and pick it up like it's been nothing. There are some really beautiful friendships that I have with people from uni and from the US, where it feels like no time has passed when we chat.
Which is, those ones are awesome. Like, those are true friends. Like, I've got friends like that back at home, who I probably value their friendships way more now than I ever did when I lived there. And funnily enough, with my family, I'm closer to them than I ever have been.
Yeah.
Because when I came out here, my relationship with my dad was damaged. Didn't really speak to my brothers pretty much unless I was on the phone to my mum and they happened to be around. And she'd be like, say hello, and I'd be like, hi, and my brother would be like, oh, you alright? And that'd kind of be it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, my mum, my dad, my brothers, my nephew, you know, we might not always catch up super regularly, and we can, I mean, I do with my parents, but my brothers and my nephew not as much, but like, it's just so joyous when we do get to talk to each other and have those interactions.
I sometimes will go like so long without talking to anybody in my family, which is
that surprises me.
So surprising and shocking because I talk about them all the time, like incessantly. I always want to talk about my family and how incredible I think they are and how close I am with them. It always is so easy to just pick up wherever with a lot of them. Cousins, a lot of my cousins. I've like through something really interesting has happened for me through COVID, where I have had the opportunity to connect with cousins that when we were growing up, I saw them as just kids, like younger kids that were kind of annoying. The younger cousins is what we'd call them, which is like such a just ageist divide based on nothing. And like the line was really arbitrarily drawn between two of my brothers that like, this is the cutoff. If you're younger than Brendan, you're part of the younger cousins. And like one of my cousins just squeaked by on like a technicality. And you're just kind of like, why did we do that? Who knows? But now I've had the opportunity through COVID to like chat with some of those cousins, and I'm closer to one of those cousins than I am to some of the cousins that I was so close with and so tight-knit with back when we were younger. And similarly have connected with my oldest cousin, who he had the same mentality that we had, that like, these are children, get them away from me. And like having that opportunity to just reconnect on a bit of like a level playing field has been so interesting. And I think time is part of that as well. Time as well as distance.
Time and like figuring yourselves out, and because age doesn't really come into it for me anymore. Like I have friends in their 40s, 50s and 60s. Yeah. And 30, like I actually don't think I have any friends in their 20s, but also most people are older than
Hold on a second.
Oh, sorry.
Rude. Not 30 yet.
Yes, okay. Yeah. So I've got like you and Nick, and I really, sorry if I'm forgetting anyone, but and like, you know, apart from my friends back at home, but I mean like here in Australia. Yeah. I think my next youngest friends after you are like in their Dean's age, so like early to mid 30s. But yeah, like, you know, age just doesn't come into it anymore. You know, if I'm a really cool 20-year-old, I'd totally be friends with them. It's not that but it's just whatever you connect on, right? And I do think people always describe me as an old soul, and I think that's how I've ended up with so many friends who are older than me, because it's connecting on that level, the type of things that we want to talk about, and So I think as you get older, age becomes less of a factor in your friends. I guess it's more just depends what you're doing with your life to who are you going to be interacting with. Yeah. Because if you're going out partying all the time, like, you're probably not going to meet many people too much older than you. Yeah. Hopefully.
And the connections may not be as deep either, because people are just kind of not in that mentality of connecting with others.
And if it's in that drinking culture. I'm
not saying that's the rule, but that seems to be the normal, just from my experiences with it. Yeah. It's really hard to make deeper connections with people when everybody's drunk. Yeah,
or you can almost like end up in these really deep chats, but then when you see each other sober, we're just like, that was cool. Yeah. Let's not talk about that again.
because people don't want to have, I feel like part of it's that people just don't want to have deeper connections with each other. They don't want to be vulnerable with each other. Well, and so they're only vulnerable when they're drinking and their inhibitions are lowered.
I think it's uncomfortable, right? I have like one friend in particular that comes to mind. I love her so much, but she gets all weirded out and stuff by having kind of deep chats, or she'll be like, "Oh, bro, like coming out with these like really deep things," and I'm like, "Yeah,
let's talk about it. Let's get into it."
So, yeah, and I think that's my first experience of someone who is like so visually uncomfortable, and I could be totally wrong, but like maybe has just not really had anyone have those kind of conversations with her before, and doesn't know how to kind of interact, and but I think we could go on with that one.
We could have so many chats about emotions. This is basically just the emotion chat.
Yeah. But one thing I'd like to circle back to before we finish up is about, reconnecting with crying.
Yeah.
Is that, for me, I actually think it's me being so sensitive, I think is one of my superpowers. I think it's one of my best personality traits. And that's taken a lot to get to this point, to actually be proud of being able to cry openly, be emotional, not push those things away. Like, there are definitely times where I may try not to cry. Like, like you said, when you're trying to get your words out and you can't, and you're trying to focus on just speaking. But yeah, the more I do it, the more I think it allows me to connect with myself on a deeper level, which allows me to connect with other people on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And just rewiring that thought that like it's weak to be sensitive, it's undesirable, all of that stuff. I really want to step into that feminine power of being sensitive and being emotional. Like, it even, I feel like I get guided, but like I will just have these random, like I won't be sad or anything, because I also happy cry. I also cry because I'm like, when I meditate, or when I hear a song, or read something, or even just think a certain thought, I can just literally within a split second start getting
that actually has reminded me that some of the only times that I cry is when I'm watching like those happy videos of dogs finding families.
Yeah.
And like I like choke up just thinking about it.
Yeah. Because that's like, so beautiful.
It's the beauty of the world that like makes me cry anymore.
Yes.
And that's like it. And I don't cry when I'm sad, but I'll cry over meeting my colleague's new kitten.
Yeah.
Via Teams, which I did today, and I didn't full cry, but like I had that moment where I was choked up.
Yeah. Yeah, because
so
it's
that emotional overflow.
It is. It's that emotional overflow, and the more you let it happen, because like yes, like seeing adorable videos and like emotional reunions between like people and animals or whatever, like and having a little cry about that because it's just so wonderful. But then also, I don't know, for me, like I get triggered, and I say triggered in a good way. It could be just like one line of a song, or I don't know, and I just get so overcome, and it could even be just like 5 seconds of like, I don't know how to recreate it, but literally as if I'm kind of like mid massive emotional release, and I'll have just like this really brief moment where it will just suddenly come up and then just immediately go away again. And I feel that that's actually guiding me to like pay attention, because having that emotion comes so easily to me now, because I've stopped kind of pushing it down. I feel like it comes up when my like guides or my higher self is saying, hey, pay attention to this because there's something for you to learn from it. And it literally happened. I've been going through a bit of a stressful time recently. And the other day I don't know why, I just, I'll often like wake up with a song stuck in my head out of nowhere, and I'll put that song on, and then I'll have this experience where I'll get this need to cry suddenly come up. And it's so funny how like that specific line of the song will almost be like a reassurance for something that's going on in my life, or if I've been indecisive about something and I've been trying to figure out, it doesn't even necessarily need to be like something emotional that's going on in my life, but me crying then brings this line of a song to my attention and go, oh, that's the answer. Like that's the answer that I've been looking for. Or maybe I have been really down recently, and like that's the thing that I needed to hear to remind me of like the state of being that I should be in, or the thought track that I should be on.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible to be so in tune with yourself, to be able to notice that. And to be kind of clued in enough to be aware that you need to like focus in those moments.
It's just been going, I'd say probably like the last 6 months. Because prior to that, like I would have these, emotions come up, like I'd be driving along, and there are certain songs that always get me, and I could be like singing along totally emotionally controlled, and then this one part I'll just be like like the cry will just,
it happens,
like I can't actually finish the finish singing because I just get overcome with this emotion. And I would push that away previously because I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm so ridiculous, why am I so emotional? But then, driving around in my car, I started to just let myself do it. And the more I let myself do it, the more it happened with all kinds of things. It's not just, because I know there's probably lots of people that could relate and say, oh yeah, well I get emotional at certain songs and when I see a cute puppy video but it could be something so small. Yeah. Like I don't know, like I could be looking at this pillow and then all of a sudden have this, so I don't think that it's necessarily about being emotional, but like because I connect to that so easily now, it comes up to make me pay attention to whatever it is that I'm looking at or hearing
whatever
or reading.
You're triggered by.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I do like, one of the only times that I like let myself be a bit emotionally vulnerable like that is when I'm worshiping at church. Like that's kind of when I'll have those moments where I'm like, this line and this song is really getting me today. And I'll feel like it's okay and it's acceptable to like just feel it and like let it go.
And do you feel really connected to God at that moment?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think what primed me for this was all the meditation that I've been doing over the last few years, and like in my meditations becoming so overwhelmed with like joy and love that I think that was part of the reason that I stopped trying to stop myself, because that's kind of what I feel like. I get overwhelmed with this sense of just like resonating and connecting and love. Like it's a really strong emotion. It's not a sad thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was through all of those meditations that when it would happen, I was like, well, this is such a nice feeling. Like, why should I stop it? So who cares if it seems silly? I'm alone. No one's around. Like,
nobody's gonna know. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you say that, because it's when you're in church and when you're most connected to God that you let yourself do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about. That's like, we've just solved my cry problem. I think, y'all get ready. I'm about to cry all the time. Be prepared.
Cool. Well, we'll check back in with you. And see how you're going.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that super intense note, we'll finish the episode maybe.
Gonna go have a cry, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll let you guys know in a week if I've cried. That'll be our follow-up question.
Ugh. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Stay tuned for some tears. Bye, guys.